So Jorge Polanco was reportedly dealing with a patellar tendon injury this year. Does that change the way we look back on his season and the question of picking up his club option this winter? We'll discuss and then grade some of your Mariners trade ideas coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Friday, October 11th, 2024. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Fan Fiction Friday. We'll be looking at some of your Mariners trade ideas, but we also have some Jorge Polanco news to talk about first. Before we get into that, though, shout out to our title sponsor today, PrizePicks. Download the app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. The link is in the description, and you can sign up for a free 7-day trial. So yesterday, it was reported by Jeff Passan of ESPN that Jorge Polanco is set to undergo patellar tendon surgery. And this is an injury that, according to Passan, Polanco was dealing with for most of this past season. Now, we did know that Polo was dealing with some sort of leg issue, but it was more so described as a hamstring injury, and he was able to play through it for the rest of the year. But patellar tendon injuries typically are pretty serious. I know of two that stick out in my mind. Being a Seahawks fan, it's Will Dissly, it's Jimmy Graham. Both of those guys had patellar tendon injuries, and both of those guys were not really the same players since those injuries occurred. So this is, one, pretty remarkable that he even played through it. But two, also gives us maybe at least a little bit more context as to why he struggled so much. Passan mentioned that this was a big reason that he was struggling from the left side of the plate, and obviously his numbers from the left side of the plate nowhere close to his career norms. Passan says that he should be ready, or at least the hope is that he'll be ready by spring training. But before we get into Polo's future and how that might pertain to the Mariners, how does this change your perception, Colby, of Polo's season?
I mean, it's still a disappointment. There's no way around that. You needed him to be more than he was for you, but it also provides some context and some, possible explanation for why he struggled. It's real easy for us to sit here and always say like, oh, well, he struggled because the Mariners acquired him and he can't hit at T-Mobile and blah, 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 blah. It's not always the case. We oftentimes don't know what's going on with the player until after the season ends. And so, it's maybe it was mostly just this knee issue was just hampering him all year. And that really slowed him down and hurt his numbers. Maybe it's that he's just an older player who's declining, or maybe it's a combination of both. But it's a bit of it's a bummer, obviously, for Polo. It's pretty serious injury. We don't know the severity of it, but obviously it was not severe enough, or it apparently wasn't severe enough that they thought it could get worse if he played, but it's severe enough that he needs surgery. I'm not a doctor. Shocking, I know. But
you just play one on TV.
Sure. Not even. But it's a tough little, it's a tough bit of news that does offer some explanation for the season that he had, and does provide some level of excuse, if we want to call it that, for why he underperformed, or at least some, plausible rationale for why he struggled the way he did. But we'll have to wait and see how the surgery goes, how serious it is. I think a full recovery from like a completely torn is like 6 months plus, which would take him into the regular season next year, not just spring. Like no chance he's ready for spring training. Yeah. So it's in terms of what, how we read his 2024 now. Obviously he's a tough dude. He's playing through this. He's trying his best to help the team. And he was pretty good for a couple different stretches there with this injury. It just ultimately the wear and tear was just too much, and it might offer some explanation for why Polanco struggled the way he did. But overall, it's still a disappointing season. One of the more disappointing seasons on this club. But you got to give credit to Polo. He's a tough dude. Played through this without anybody, any of us knowing it, and did what he could. But obviously, he was severely hampered by it.
I've seen a lot of Mariners fans take this news and go, oh, well, now I definitely want to bring him back because clearly there's a reason that he was so bad this year. I'm in the complete opposite direction because Polo is 31 years old. He'll be 32 next July. He is coming off of a down year. Obviously, some of that, can be due to the injury. But like I said earlier, the guys that I know that have had patella tendon injuries, and obviously this is in a different sport, but still, they weren't the same guys once they got back from it. And again, we're not talking about a 26, 27-year-old here. We're talking about 31, 32-year-old here. So this makes me even more out on him.
Right. I mean, it all but guarantees that the team will decline the option, which they were going to do anyways. But obviously, it's not until 4 to 6 weeks after you have the surgery that you are even supposed to be able to put all your weight on the leg that you had surgery on. And even then, it's probably with a pretty heavy brace there to protect it. And so it's not just that, hey, this guy might not be ready by spring training, probably won't be. It's not just that this guy might miss some time in the regular season. It's that Polanco won't be able to do his off-season work, or not to the extent that he needs to. And so he's going to be behind the 8 ball already. He's going to be, way behind schedule based on what he would normally do in an off season. And then there's a question of how fast can he get on schedule. We've seen what happens when guys miss spring training. It takes them quite a while to get back into the feel of things. And you can only take so many, AAA at bats, and you go to the big leagues, it's still going to be an adjustment period there. So I think at best, assuming this is if the term is the hope is that he's ready to go by spring training, that tells me that this is probably a real, a pretty significant tear, which means it's probably 6 months minimum. So if he's ready to go by spring training, I think what that really means is that he's ready to begin his off-season work in March.
Yeah.
And that's just a no. It's just no, not at $12 million. You're not even interested in it. And honestly, I don't know how interested I am in if they decline the option and nobody wants to sign him, and you can get him back here for $3, $4, $5 million and then load up on incentives. Fine, I guess. But the issue there again is that he's going to basically be starting back from square one when he's finally healthy, and he's not going to be cleared for baseball activity until, at least 6 months. You have to take the when you're considering things like this, you have to take the long end of a recovery period. And it's not uncommon for these injuries. It's not super uncommon for it to take a full year after the surgery before the patient feels like they have full range of motion that they used to have, and that they trust the knee 100%. That's the other thing too. There's a psychological factor here. So Polanco, I like the dude. And is there a very specific scenario where the Mariners bring him back and it makes sense? Sure. It doesn't start with picking that $12 million option. No. And it probably takes what is akin to, here's $2 million, and then for every, 50 plate appearances you're able to take, we'll give you $100,000 or whatever, So it's got to be super team friendly, but ultimately I think this all but ensures that Jorge Polanco will be playing baseball somewhere else next year, if at all.
Yeah.
Because again, the age is also something that is.
Yeah. I think the risk of him going into spring training and even the regular season unsigned is real, given all of this.
Right.
It might be one of those 1+1 deals with a team,
right,
where they're more so invested in him for 2026 rather than 2025, but they're just going to get him in, monitor his rehab, all that. And then, whatever they get in 2025 from him as a bonus.
Right. I mean, it's also worth noting, though, that Polanco missed half of the 2023 season with a hamstring issue as well. So this isn't the healthiest guy in the world either. So, we'll have to see how it goes with Polanco, but I would be pretty surprised if he was playing baseball with the Mariners at any point in 2025. And, again, hopefully we don't have all the information, but hopefully this is a relatively mild patella tendon issue. And the timeline of him being ready to go by spring training is, valid, turns out to be true. But even then, even at the best case scenario, no, you're not picking up the option, and no, you're probably not even giving him a contract that he would consider taking with you. So it's the end of the line.
It just seems like optimism that you would expect from his camp going into a year where he's going to be a free agent.
Yeah.
So I'm a little concerned about the validity of that timeline. And at that point, again, I'm out, because even if he is ready to go by then, again, like you said, he's not going to be able to get in his off-season work. He's going to be 32 years old at some point next year. He already hasn't been the healthiest dude in the world. He's coming off of a down year. There's just so many red flags there that even like it has to be a very, very specific situation for me to consider bringing him back. And at that point, you probably have other options solidified. So, yeah. All right, so it is Fan Fiction Friday. We are going to get into your Mariners trade ideas here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It is Fan Fiction Friday. Let's get into your Mariners trade ideas. This one comes from Joey. It's a straight up 1-for-1 with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Brian Hayes, third baseman for the Pirates, for first base prospect Tyler Locklear from the Mariners.
Brian Hayes was the worst hitter in baseball this last year. I believe his WRC plus was 53. It was
something like that. Yeah. 59.
Much better. Sorry to disrespect Brian Hayes there.
Yeah.
Plus defender at third base still. Maybe the best defender at third base. Kind of depends on where you want to look and who you want to talk to. But so you do get an elite glove there, but a 59 WRC plus.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good of a deep defender you are, even at a premium defensive position like third base. If you're a 59 WRC plus, you have no business being in the majors.
He has parts of 5 seasons now under his belt, 4 essentially full seasons, but he's been hurt, so he hasn't played a ton. Like, he only played 96 games this year. He only played 96 in 2021, played 136 in 2022, 124 in 2023. But even then, defense was carrying his value. Right. He was a 3.2 F4 guy in 2023, but that was all defense. He was a 100 WRC plus that year. He was a league average bat, which is fine. 271, 309, 453. I mean, he's slugging at least. But, the year before he was 3.1 F4. All defense. 244, 314, 345. That's an 86 WRC plus in 136 games. Honestly, I'd rather, he's not as good of a defender, but I'd rather just have Josh Rojas.
Yeah, the other thing you have to keep in mind with Brian Hayes is that, he is locked in long term. He's under club control through the 2029 season. There's actually a club option for 2030. It may not seem like a lot. The AAV is less than $9 million, but if he's a 54 or 59 WRC plus, $9 million is a lot, especially to the Mariners, who aren't going to just eat contracts like this and be like, oh, well, we missed there. I guess we'll just, DFA him and lose $55 million for nothing. Like, they're not going to do that. They're not going to eat that money on Hayes. So A lot of red flags with Brian Hayes, and keep in mind defense a little bit overvalued in war formulations as well. So, it's just one of those things where it's like he also wasn't as good defensively this year. Now, is that injury related? Maybe it could be, but there's so much risk to Brian Hayes and Locklear isn't even a lot to give up. I don't object to giving up Locklear for just about anything. But Brian Hayes is just not the type of player that the Mariners should be taking a chance on. And it would be a chance. It'd be a huge gamble because again, like defense, great, whatever. If he does what he did this year, even with well above average defense, he's like a 1-win player at most. So just give Josh Rojas $4.5 million and he'll be at least probably a 1.5, 2-win player. And you can keep Locklear. So Brian Hayes is an interesting idea. And if he had repeated the year he did last year, this year, we'd be having a different conversation. But it is such a huge red flag and such a big risk to take on a guy in that reasonable contract if he's a 100 WRC plus player. Totally reasonable contract. But it is a huge leap of faith to assume that this dude can hit.
It's a reasonable contract, but do I want to get locked into that knowing what the financial restrictions that have unfortunately been placed upon the front office are for a guy whose offensive ceiling so far at the big league level is 271, 309, 453. Obviously with plus defense, but because it's all right, fine. Yeah, $7 million a year is totally fine. Even with the offensive concerns, that's totally fine. But for what, 7 more years? How many years?
There's a club option through 2030, so 2029 would be the soonest you can get out of it.
Yeah, 5. So 5 years. So
it's just you want $40 million for a guy who, frankly, with the season he just put up, isn't close to major league quality.
Yeah.
So there's some good things there, but you really have to believe in the bad, and you have to believe that this guy, you can fix him and not only get him back to where he was at his high point, you have to find another gear, that something he's never shown before, to justify trading for him and just making him the solution at third base. So I don't object to the cost of Tyler Locklear. If you can get a solid third baseman for Tyler Locklear, do it in a heartbeat, no problem. Yeah. Even if it's only for 1 year, do it in a heartbeat, no problem. But I just don't trust Brian Hayes to hit at all. So for me, 35, 40, I don't like Brian Hayes. I don't like that idea.
Yeah, you need to get better offensively. And if that means sacrificing defense, then so be it. Like, you have to get someone who better profiles at that position, offensively speaking, than what you have right now. And again, it's just like, if I want a guy that's going to hover around 100 WRC plus and give me, pretty good defense, it's not going to be as good as Brian Hayes, but I'll just stick with Josh Rojas.
The bat has a higher floor than Brian Hayes.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So
I'll go. I mean, it's fine valuation, so I'll give it a 40, but yeah,
it's just not the type of player that the Mariners should be targeting.
AJ has 2 separate deals for Beatty of the Mets. Brett Beatty, third baseman, former top prospect of the New York Mets. The first deal is Emerson Hancock for Brett Beatty, straight up, or Logan Evans plus Mitch Haniger for Brett Beatty, and the Mets take on all of Haniger's money. So let me attack the second one. I don't think the Mets are going to pay essentially $17.5 million plus Brett Beatty for Logan Evans. That's just a non-starter there. Yeah, that's just not going to happen. So on that one, 25.
20, yep.
Yeah. And then Emerson Hancock for Brett Beatty. I'll give Colby the floor here so he can tell you how worthless Emerson Hancock is.
I mean, it's a couple of what we would kind of charitably call failed first-round prospects trading hands here. Hancock is, like I said, he's a 5 or a 6. I mean, like, at best, that's his ceiling. And I think people kind of remember all the pretty good starts he had, and they don't look at the numbers where he was running, a 5.5 FIP, and he had a negative point. He's worth almost -1 win by WAR standards. So Yeah, I'm totally fine trading him. And Beatty is the kind of guy, or is the type of guy that, honestly, Jerry has gone after in the past. He's a former top prospect, former first round pick. We know Jerry likes to take shots on those guys. Beatty also pretty decent defender at third. But again, we get back to this, like, how much do you trust Beatty over just bringing back Josh Rojas? Because the cost is fine. Emerson Hancock, fine, whatever. I will replace Emerson Hancock in 5 minutes. Or I could.
If you want to do this and also take a shot on Josh Rowe, I mean, like, this doesn't preclude you from doing anything else at third base.
Beatty's going to be a minimum guy. Yeah. Does he have an option left?
He does have an option. Well, actually,
might not
no.
have updated yet. So
yeah, no, that's a pre-2024. Yeah, no. So he has to be on the major league roster.
Right, and he's really only third base guy.
Yeah, now that I know that he's out of options, I'm out.
You just, again, it's one of those things where, like, you have to really believe that you know how to, fix Brett Beatty. 215, 282, 325 at the big league level. It's just not going to get it done. In AAA, he was okay this year in the International League, not the PCL. So, obviously it's a much more difficult offensive environment over there. 252, 349, 504. He crushed AAA in 2023 for a brief time before he was called up to the big leagues, and he just struggled. Like, this is a guy who right now kind of looks like a 4A player. There's not anything for him to prove in AAA. There's nothing there for him left to do. So I do think Beatty, or I think he has a good shot to get, like, DFA, right? Or he's not going to get non-tendered. He's not ARB eligible, or he'll get swapped to a team for, nothing. And Hancock is kind of nothing. So I think,
but he's
starting a dart at the MLB trade rumors free agent list and find somebody better than Hancock. Okay.
But he's
anything,
but he's starting depth with a minor league option left.
Right.
So that gives me more roster flexibility than Brett Beatty does.
Yeah,
so
honestly,
I think I'd just rather keep that. To be honest,
I think if you're the Mets, you'd rather have Trent Thornton than Emerson Hancock.
Yeah, that's just too much for me for Brett Beatty without the option to send him down.
No, I'm probably not tendering Trent Thornton anyway. So if I can get Brett Beatty for him, fine, I'll take the shot there. But yeah, like, I don't have a problem giving up Hancock for Beatty even without the option. I don't care. I don't value Emerson Hancock enough to prevent him from taking any shot, really, on just about any player. I will give you Emerson Hancock for the shot on a talented player. But again, if you're the Mariners, you have to really believe that you can fix Brett Beatty, because otherwise you're just rolling into third base or rolling into 2025 with a worse third base, position than you did in 2024. So yeah, I think Beatty's the type of guy that the Mariners typically take a shot on. So I think it's fine, but the cost has to be essentially a guy that I would throw away. Like, I would have no problem if the team DFA this guy tomorrow. That's the only thing I'm giving up for Brett Beatty, because that's pretty much what Brett Beatty is, a guy that I probably am going to DFA in a couple months. So yeah.
So, like, I don't know, somewhere between a 45 and a 50 for me.
It's fine.
Yeah. All right. We got a couple more trades here to go over in just a moment, but first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It is Fan Fiction Friday. We are reading and grading your Mariners trade ideas. We got this one from Kai Boren. It's a deal with the Cincinnati Reds. Mariners get Jonathan India and Alexis Diaz for Logan Evans, Dominic Canzone, and Josh Rojas. But Kai Bowen also adds here, after some reflection, the deal still felt light, so I would throw in Michael Morales as well. So Evans, Canzone, Rojas, and Morales for India and Diaz. Thoughts?
As it so happens, both India and Diaz are players I have heavily considered for my offseason plan, which Ty and I will reveal our individual plans next week on our Patreon show.
Patreon.com/Control the Zone.
We are professionals. But
That's right.
So I have looked at these guys a little bit. You know what I really like about Alexis Diaz, Ty?
He's Edwin Diaz's brother.
Well, no, but I mean, sure.
Yeah.
Big extension guy. Extension guy.
Of course.
Yes, with a fantastic fastball. Without fantastic fastball velo, it's actually 93, 94 mile an hour fastball. So it's nothing all that entertain or any cool at all, but spends it very well. It gets a lot of ride in the zone. He's going to make $4.5 million this year in our, India's cost controlled as well. I think India's going to make. I think he made 5 this year. I don't know if it was a straight 5 and 5 or if there was a.
He is set to make 5.4.
Okay, so about $10 million to add these two guys. And it's going to cost you Logan Evans, Dominic Canzone, whatever. Don't care about that. Rojas. So basically, Rojas pays for Diaz. It just in terms of money.
Sure.
So you're paying about $5 million to get this guy, Jonathan India, and it's going to cost you Logan Evans and Michael Morales. Now, both of those guys are probably, number 5, number 4 starters at best. But unfortunately, they do represent a large chunk of your starting pitching depth entering next year. If you trade,
and this is why you can't trade Emerson Hancock for Brett.
This is why you absolutely should. So that way you're not tempted to trade, any of the good pitchers in your system that might be worth something.
Right.
Both of these guys finished the year in Double-A, so they will be, in theory, major league ready or be ready for the opportunity for the challenge of pitching at the big league level.
Yep.
If you trade both of them in the same deal, then your number 6 is Hancock and your number 7 is Brandon Garcia, who's got 1 year of starting, under his belt.
I mean, he is my favorite of the 3 of Evans.
Sure, he is.
Morales,
but it's like, it's not like there's a big gap, right? And it's not like there's a sure thing that he can help you. And with Woo's injury issues, well documented, and just the fickleness, is that a word? The fickleness of pitcher injuries. Like, you're not too far away. And by the way, Hancock's got his own injury issues in his past to worry about. So you're not too far away from having to rely on, Brandon Garcia to make 15 starts for you. And you hope nobody else gets hurt, because after that, it's the Darren McCacken types. You know what I mean? And so you're really living dangerously here.
I'm just going to get out ahead of it in the comments. We love Darren McCacken. Yeah.
Did I recently purchase my Darren McCacken autograph card for the Jerry DePoto draft binder? I sure did.
Really?
Looks good. Mm-hmm. Looks good. But yeah, I'm concerned about this deal is that you're giving up a lot of your pitching depth. And just because it's not like super great pitching depth doesn't mean it's not important. And frankly, Evans and Morales are better than Hancock right now. So to give up both in a deal, I'm a little bit on the fence. But then again, India probably helps you at third base. Diaz, not very good this year, not terrible, just not nearly as good as he was in 2023. So you might be buying low, but there's a shot that Diaz is just Trent Thornton. But I will point out, again, 100th percentile in extension. Big extension guy, Diaz is. So, it's a tough trade to judge. I also wonder, with the hiring of Francona, would the Reds even entertain a trade like this, where they're getting a bunch of prospects basically for
Yeah.
2 players that they're going to theoretically rely on. Now,
they're getting Rojas, who
right, more or less replaces India.
I mean, he might just be left-handed Jonathan India.
He might be, but now you're trading Diaz for, a couple number 5s.
Well, you get outfield depth, and you get
is it depth though?
you get 2 guys that are at least close to major league ready that can pitch out of your rotation, and they obviously need pitching help, especially on the back end of their rotation. So, and they obviously really like guys from Seattle. So,
I mean, we assume. I wonder though, because Francona's there, I don't think Francona signed on to sit through the first couple stages of a reshuffle.
No, they're trying to take that thing to the next level.
Which could they trade Diaz and still take a jump next year? Yeah, absolutely, they could.
Well, and with India,
do it?
Yeah. Well, with India specifically, I mean, they have Steer and and McLean's going to be coming back, and they have Ellie obviously, and Encarnacion Strand and Noelvi, and so
right. Cam Collier's coming up the pipeline pretty quick too. Like
Cam Collier,
sure. Yeah. So I think they'll shop India. I don't have a problem with that. I think when you just combine all these little X factors, right? Like how are the Reds going to attack this offseason after hiring Francona? It's not a move you make unless you can convince Terry Francona that you're in it to win the Central next year.
Yeah.
The uncertainty of the Mariners and their starting pitching depth, giving up these couple of guys. How are the Reds going to value Diaz coming off of a disappointing year after he had a great year the year before? Like, is India and Rojas, is that even an upgrade for Seattle? Is that even, or is...
I have major concerns about Jonathan India.
Yeah, we talked about India probably more than any non-Mariner on this podcast.
His numbers outside of Great American Ballpark are average at best. And look, he played third base in Florida, but he hasn't played it at the major league level.
No, he hasn't played it in 5 years.
And that's probably what you're requiring him to do, is play third base, not second for you.
Howard hasn't really ever been anything to write home about.
And offensively, away from Great American Ballpark, he's pretty much been right-handed Josh Rojas.
Yeah.
And probably is a worse defender.
Right.
For $1 million more than Rojas.
We could probably do like a whole 30-minute show on just this trade because there's a lot of little, tentacles and, decision tree things going on here. I'm going to say 45. I just don't know. I don't know how to really value this. Could be a 50. Like
it's the Diaz part that I get hung up on, but I think like you're giving them interesting pieces. To me, both of the pitchers is a bit rich for me.
Right.
Even though that I'm getting a really good reliever, or at least someone that can be a really good reliever in Diaz. And I'm addressing one of the positions of need for myself. But again, I'm not sure that India is that much better than Rojas.
You're paying $1 million more to get India over Rojas. You're also a pretty right-handed heavy lineup right now. So you swap one of your lefty bats for a righty bat. So there's a lot of really interesting. I think Diaz is a totally worthy trade candidate. I think India by himself, unfortunately, is going to make a lot of sense for the Mariners this winter because there's just not a lot of options. You combine them together, it kind of gets kind of sticky, and then you throw in the Mariners pitching depth questions in this. It's just, and then also there is a little bit of a monetary gain with the Mariners and is adding $5 million in payroll, more or less, to jump from India to Rojas. Is that really worth it? You do get Diaz out of it though, too. So, it's very, probably should give it a 50 just because it's very back and forth. And it's there's enough tit for tat where you're like, well, this, but also this. So probably did a really good job. So 50, I'll go 50,
50, maybe even 55, because it is a really interesting conversation starter. I just, I don't really know how to feel about it from the Mariners side of things. It's really just the India Rojas element and the two pitchers that I'm getting hung up on the most with that.
Would you rather, if it was this deal, but you got to keep Evans and you instead had to give up Locklear or Ty Pete?
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you give up a little more to keep one of those pitchers just because of where you're at in your build?
I think at that point I'm just moving on. I think it's just one prospect in that range too rich for me. It's more rich because it's two pitchers and that takes away more of my starting depth. But even with Ty Pete, like that's just too much for me.
What if instead of Morales, it was Jeter Martinez? Still a pitcher, but a little bit further away. Not going to factor into 2025.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But then at that point, are the Reds interested on a guy who's that far away? So yeah, nice deal. It's something I could see happening, and I don't know how I feel about it from a Mariners perspective.
Yeah.
I do like Diaz quite a bit. India to me, just so meh that I have no idea how to value him in a trade. He's a really difficult guy to pinpoint.
All right, that is going to do it for our show. But before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.